There's something strangely comforting about the idea of making money without doing anything for it. And yet, at the same time, it almost feels too simple to be real. The thought that your bank account could quietly generate $1,000 every single month while you go about your normal life sounds less like a financial strategy and more like something reserved for people who already made it. But here's where it gets interesting, because once you actually break that number down and understand what it really takes to get there, it stops feeling like a fantasy and starts feeling like a very specific equation. My name is Daniel, and I want to walk you through that equation in a way that doesn't just focus on the numbers, but also on the habits and decisions that quietly shape whether this is something you ever reach or just something you keep watching videos about. If you ask most people how much money they think they need invested to make $1,000 a month in dividends, the answers are usually all over the place. Some people will say $100,000 because they've seen high-yield stocks online, while others will assume it's closer to $1 million because they associate passive income with extreme wealth. The reality sits somewhere in between, but the exact number depends on something most people don't think deeply about, which is dividend yield. That's just a way of saying how much income your investments generate compared to how much money you've put in. Let's slow this down and make it real. If you want $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year. Now imagine your investments are paying you a 4% annual dividend yield, which is a fairly reasonable and sustainable number for a balanced portfolio. When you reverse engineer that, you'd need about $300,000 invested to generate $12,000 a year. And this is where people either get motivated or discouraged, because $300,000 feels like a very different kind of goal compared to just earning passive income. But here's the part that most videos skip over, and it's honestly more important than the math itself. That $300,000 isn't just a number, it's a reflection of behavior over time. It represents years of decisions, small habits, and trade-offs that don't feel significant in the moment, but compound quietly in the background. Because nobody just wakes up with $300,000 invested unless they've either inherited it or built systems that consistently move money in that direction. Now think about the average financial life in the US for a second. Someone earns maybe $60,000 to $80,000 a year, pays rent or mortgage, covers car payments, groceries, insurance, and then somewhere in between all of that tries to save what's left. And what's left often isn't much, not because they're irresponsible, but because modern life is designed to absorb income as quickly as it arrives. Subscriptions, convenience, upgrades, and small lifestyle increases slowly reshape what normal spending looks like. So when you hear that you need $300,000 invested to make $1,000 a month in dividends, the real question isn't, is that possible? But rather, what kind of financial life leads to that number? Because if someone saves $500 a month and invests it consistently with an average return of around 7%, it takes roughly 20 to 22 years to reach that level. And I know that sounds like a long time, but the deeper realization is that those years are going to pass anyway. The only difference is whether that time is building something in the background or just maintaining the present. This is where psychology starts to matter more than math. Most people don't struggle with understanding what to do financially. They struggle with staying consistent long enough for it to matter. There's always a reason to pause, whether it's a vacation, an unexpected expense, or just the feeling that you deserve to enjoy your money now. And that's not wrong, but it creates this constant tension between short-term satisfaction and long-term stability. Let's bring this into a real-life example, because this is where it usually clicks. Imagine two people earning the same salary. One person increases their lifestyle every time their income goes up, upgrading apartments, cars, and daily habits. The other allows some lifestyle improvement, but quietly directs an extra $300 to $500 a month into investments. 10 years later, they don't look dramatically different on the surface, but underneath, one has built a financial engine that's starting to generate income, while the other is still entirely dependent on their paycheck. And what's interesting is that the second person doesn't feel rich during those 10 years. In fact, they might feel slightly restricted compared to their peers. But then something shifts. Once the portfolio starts producing even a few $100s a month,
the relationship with money begins to change. It's no longer just something you earn, it becomes something that works for you. Now, here's where things get a little more nuanced, because not all dividend strategies are created equal. Some people chase higher yields, looking for 6, 7, or even 8% returns, which lowers the amount of money needed up front. In theory, that sounds efficient, because instead of needing $300,000, maybe you only need $150,000 to $200,000. But higher yields often come with higher risk, and sometimes those dividends aren't as stable as they appear. This creates a subtle but important trade-off between safety and speed. A lower yield might require more money, but it's often tied to more stable companies that can continue paying dividends through different economic cycles. A higher yield might get you to $1,000 a month faster, but it also introduces uncertainty, which can undermine the whole idea of reliable passive income. And this is where a lot of people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They focus so much on reaching the income number quickly that they overlook the importance of consistency and durability. It's like trying to build a house faster by using weaker materials. You might finish sooner, but you'll always be wondering if it can withstand the next storm. Around this point, it's worth pausing for a second, because if you're enjoying this kind of deeper, more thoughtful breakdown of money and how it actually works in real life, this is exactly what this channel is about. So if that's something you want more of, consider subscribing, because these conversations are meant to help you see money in a way that feels practical, not just theoretical. Coming back to the bigger picture, the goal of earning $1,000 a month in dividends isn't really about the number itself. It's about what that number represents. It's a shift from needing to earn every dollar actively to having at least part of your income generated passively. And even though $1,000 a month won't replace a full-time salary for most people, it changes your level of financial pressure in a very real way. Think about what an extra $1,000 a month does in everyday life. It can cover a significant portion of rent, eliminate a car payment, or simply give you breathing room in a budget that used to feel tight. And more importantly, it reduces the urgency behind every financial decision. When you're not relying entirely on your job for survival, you start making choices from a different place. This is why the journey matters just as much as the destination, because by the time someone reaches $300,000 invested, they've usually developed a completely different mindset around money. They've learned how to delay gratification, how to manage risk, and how to think long-term in a world that constantly encourages short-term thinking. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Once you reach that first $1,000 a month, the process often accelerates, because now you're not just investing your own money, you're reinvesting the income your investments are generating. That creates a feedback loop where growth starts to build on itself in a more noticeable way. But getting to that first milestone requires patience that most people underestimate. It requires accepting that progress will feel slow for a long time, and that there won't be many visible signs that anything is working. And that's usually the point where people quit, not because the strategy failed, but because it didn't feel rewarding fast enough. So when you think about how much you need to make $1,000 a month in dividends, it's not just a financial question, it's a behavioral one. It's about whether you can consistently make decisions that prioritize future stability over present comfort, even when there's no immediate payoff. And maybe the most honest way to look at it is this. The number, whether it's $200,000 or $300,000, isn't as important as the direction you're moving in, because every dollar you invest is essentially buying you a small piece of future freedom. It might not feel like much at first, but over time, those pieces start to add up into something meaningful. As you start to understand this, the idea of passive income stops being about escaping work entirely and becomes more about creating options. Options to work less, to take risks, to step away when you need to, or simply to feel less pressure in a system that often demands constant output. And if you really think about it, that's what most people are actually chasing when they say they want passive income. It's not just the money, it's the feeling of having more control over their time and their decisions. So yes, the math says you might need around $300,000 invested at a 4% yield to generate $1,000 a month. But the deeper story is about what it takes to build that kind of financial foundation in the first place, and how that process quietly changes the way you see money, risk, and even your own future. If conversations like this help you think differently about money, consider subscribing to the channel. And I'm curious, what's one financial habit you've built that actually made a noticeable difference in your life over time?